Hey you, welcome back to Through the Decades, the podcast. This series, I'm in Gabriel Court in Saffron Walden, Essex, which is another McCarthy Stone retirement living development. Just like last time, throughout the series, I'll be interviewing some of the homeowners and getting an insight into their entire lives from their childhood through the decades to the present day. And this week on the podcast, I'm joined by David, who is 80 years young. So David, would you like to kickstart the episode by telling us a bit about yourself, who you are, and a bit about your life?
Yes, my name's David. I've had what I would call a good life, an eventful life. I've never done anything super special, but I've always been competent. I've always enjoyed it. I look back with great happiness and great satisfaction with a good life, well led. Unlike my mother, who had a hard life. Her generation went through world wars. Mind you, I was born in the war, and I can tell you one interesting story. My mother lived to be 97, and at the end of her life, she was in a care home, and when I visited her shortly before she passed away, she had a carer with her, and she said to the carer, "This is my son David. He was very special to me because when he was born during the war," she said, "I was in hospital and there was aeroplanes going over. They were bombers, and the air raid siren went off. Most of the people went down to the air raid shelters, but of course the midwife stayed, and David was born. And the midwife cut the cord, put David into my arms. I kissed him, held him in the air and said, 'Please, Mr. German pilot, don't drop your bombs on my beautiful baby boy.'" Wow. But now I've grown up. I look back to a happy childhood. But my dad was in the war, like so many others. He went off to war when my mum was 8 months pregnant with me. And I often say to younger people, imagine what that's like. You're having your first baby, you're 8 months pregnant, and your husband goes off to war. You may never see him again. And in fact, I never saw my dad until the war was over and he came home when I was 3.5. Apparently, I don't remember it, of course, but apparently I didn't want anything to do with him. I was used to having all the kisses and cuddles from my mum, and suddenly there's this strange man, and he was kissing her and cuddling her. I was jealous. Didn't like it at all. But of course, the months passed, and gradually I began to realise he was a lovely dad. And I loved my parents very much. But yes, I had a happy childhood. We were not well off, working class people, but we lived in very old accommodation. My mother's mother was living there, my mother's brother, and he was living there as well, so the house was very crowded. But eventually, being a council house, we were eventually rehoused in a brand new apartment, masonette, in another part of North London. And I think my parents were much happier then, and I could sense that. But no, I enjoyed my childhood. I was always, I think, fairly popular at school. I was good at sports, that helps. Went to Tottenham Grammar School, and I played rugby for the school team. In fact, I went on and I got to being playing for Middlesex schoolboys. I was also pretty good at athletics, and I got through to the finals at what was then the London Stadium at the White City. I was the 440 yard champion of the county, so I was pretty good. But partly because I matured early. I was big for my age. But by the time I got to the late teens, all the others had caught up with me, and the difference wasn't so noticeable, and I never followed up in sport because I wasn't that good. But nevertheless, you look back, it's happy times. But yes, I went to grammar school. I managed to get my 6 O-levels, and I began work taking articles to train to be a chartered accountant. I didn't actually enjoy working in the profession, and after I'd left finished my articles, I moved on to work for various manufacturing companies, and I started with Smith's Industries, a big manufacturing company. Then I went on to Thorn Electrical, another huge British company. Then I went to ITT, which is an enormous American company, and I've learned a lot, management style, and I've had a pretty good career. I was also very interested in politics when I was younger. Well, I still am now, but more active, shall we say. It was a struggle. We bought our first house. I was only 21 when I got married. Our first child came along just 2 weeks after our first wedding anniversary, so we didn't hang about, although it wasn't necessarily planned. But there you are, you've got a child, you're married, you have to face up to your responsibilities. And we took the plunge, and we bought a brand new house off the plans in Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire. It cost the princely sum of $5,200, which you look back at and you laugh, but it was a lot then, because I was only earning at the time £20 a week, $1,040 a year, $5,200, mortgage of $4,000. The percentages are still there. It was hard. We went without. We had to, but we were on the housing ladder. Gradually, as my career progressed and I moved on, I got promotions. I got better jobs, earned a lot more, and we were able to move from our semi-detached house in Hoddesdon to a 4-bedroom detached house in Cheshunt. It was always my wife's ambition to have a 4-bedroom detached house, and we did it. And by then I was working with a more local, smaller company. They were doing very well. They were expanding, but we needed bigger premises. I was on the management team of the company. We couldn't manage to buy property in the southeast. Prices were too high, so we made the decision to move somewhere cheaper, and we hit upon working down in what was the Thames Valley, down in Wiltshire, through it's so much cheaper to move to Hoddesdon, from Hoddesdon in Hertfordshire to Cheshunt in also in Hertfordshire, but then we've moved on to Wiltshire, and we again bought a much bigger 4-bedroom detached house. We were very comfortable. But village life was very different. But I'm a fairly outgoing person. I got involved in the community. My wife was also very involved. She actually was active in the local church. She was a church warden. Was very much involved in the community there. I picked up on my enjoyment of gardening and joined the garden club. And in no time at all, I'm treasurer of the garden club, and then 2 years later I'm chairman of the garden club. And
wow.
It was a very active club. We had We had competitions. We would hold shows. Whilst I was although we had quite a big garden in our house, I also had an allotment, and so I grew a lot of soft fruit, and I was very proud of the fact that for about 4 or 5 years running, I managed to get first prizes with my raspberries and my blackberries and my various other things that we grew on the allotment. And yes, it was interesting. The garden club, as I say, was active, as well as having sort of regular meetings and running these shows. We did holidays, and being the chairman, I was the principal organiser. The first one, we got in touch with a local coach company, and working with them, we did our first holiday in down in Cornwall, to see the lovely gardens. There are many lovely National Trust gardens there, of course. We went to the Eden Project, we went to the Lost Gardens of Elligan, all the big names. It went very well, so the next year we let's be a bit more ambitious, and we, believe it or not, we managed to organise a trip to Monet's garden at Giverny in France.
Wow.
Crossing the Channel, and various other gardens in France. And in other years we went up north to Yorkshire Gardens, we went to Essex Gardens, bearing in mind we were living in Wiltshire. It seems odd, but we went over to the Republic of Ireland. We went to Keukenhof to see the tulips in the spring in Holland, and we went to Bruges and Amsterdam, and we were active. It was very, very popular. And of course, if you think about it, you've got a group of people who know each other. It's sort of 40 or 45 people on a coach who are all friends. You have a wonderful holiday because you're with your friends, your mates.
Yeah.
And we all had a common interest. We were all in the gardening club, so we all liked the same things. Lots of places to visit, and yeah, it was a wonderful life. But the years move on, and as I think my wife had said, that when we got to 70, we started to get health issues. And when your family live in the southeast and you live in the southwest, if something emergency crops up, it can pose problems. So again, we thought about our options, and at the age, I retired at 65. We'd had 5 wonderful years, being very, very active as pensioners, going on holidays. We had holidays in New England in the fall. We went on safari in Kenya and South Africa. We went to New Zealand, Canada. Wonderful holidays, cruises around the Indian Ocean. But we thought, well, let's manage our life, and we thought 70 was a good age to move. We moved here. It suited us. Saffron Walden's a lovely town, delightful. And in fact, I often sort of tell the story that the Sunday Times did an article in which they chose Saffron Walden as the best town to live in England, and the village that we lived in Wiltshire, Great Somerford, was also voted the best village to live in.
Wow.
Wiltshire. So we've moved from the best to the best. So yes, we've planned well, we've worked hard, and we've got our rewards.
I mean, I felt you covered a lot there, so these questions are going to be quite brief now. But what do you, going back now, what do you remember about the place you grew up? How was life growing up for you?
Well, times were more austere, shall we say. Following the war, there was rationing. A lot of young people don't realise that although the war finished in 1945, rationing carried on until I think it was 1956.
Wow.
10 years after the war. So you look around today and you see the waste that there is. Food is wasted.
Excessively.
Very, very careless we are. We are used, of course, to having the ability to eat anything you want at any time of the year. When I was younger, strawberries you had in the summer when they were in season. 9 months of the year you didn't have strawberries. Now we've got them all the time if we want them, and so on. That's a change. People were less wealthy. Where I lived as a child, it was a close. I think it was 38 houses in the close. And in 1953, when the Queen's coronation came along, my dad, along with one other household in our close, bought a television, black and white, little tiny 12-inch screen, but half the road was in our house, the other half was in the other person's house, watching the coronation. I think that story has been told on various television programmes, but yes, it's true, it happened. Times were different. We were less demanding. Nowadays, people's expectations are so high now. They've got used to the good life. And when you can't get it, you feel deprived, but you're not really. You only have to look at, some of the holidays we've been on, we've seen real poverty in Africa and so on. And yes, we do our bit. We try. We support a number of charities, principally charities that involve people. Brenda does a lot. My wife does a lot through her church. They have links with Sudan and other places that are very, very poor. We've worked with the Samaritans, who make up Christmas boxes of toys to go out to Eastern Europe, where they're although it's in Europe, they're very poor, and they live today like I lived when I was a child, which sounds a bit crazy, but that's the way it is. So yes, people are important to me.
Tell us about your school life then. So how was school for you? Were you a big kind of school lad? Did you like school?
Yes, I loved school. It was good. Tottenham Grammar School, it was actually, doesn't exist anymore. Many years back, the Inner London Education Authority did away with grammar schools, and what was my school was merged with the secondary modern school to become a big comprehensive. So my Tottenham Grammar School doesn't exist anymore, but it was actually the first grammar school, founded by the Duchess of Somerset way back in about the 14th century or something. Of all the old boys, we are the old grammarians, the only grammar school that can call itself grammarians. But as I say, I don't think it exists anymore. But it was a good school. Practically every teacher was Dr. somebody or other. They were all very highly qualified. They wore mortarboards, they wore gowns all the time. Still threw bits of chalk at you if you didn't pay attention. But no, it was a good school. It was a high academic standard. And as I say, I didn't stay to the sixth form because I didn't have aspirations to go to university. And in those days, really, you only stayed on if you wanted a university degree for the career you wanted. For example, teaching, or maybe certain other things. But I was able to enter articles just on the basis of having 5 O-levels. I'd got more than that, but that was enough. Very soon after I took articles, they changed it to A-level entry, and then not very long after that, it became university degree entry. I'm not sure that was a good idea. in the same way that with my wife Brenda, with nursing, they're beginning to actually realise now that sending people to college to learn nursing, they don't get hands-on experience, and it's beginning to show, and they're beginning to go back to the idea of training on the job. I think training on the job is by far the best way to learn. Yes, I know things got technical and you have to have a certain amount of knowledge, but training can be done. I enjoyed my training. I was predominantly, as I say, I started off in the profession. I go out on audits, and I remember in the first year of my articles, you go out on an audit with another colleague who's in their fifth year, their final year, and I commented to him. I was earning £4 a week at the time, and I said, I could got a job anywhere for £10 or £12 a week, but he says, you're lucky. I didn't get any pay when I first started. My dad had to pay to have me trained, and that's how it was. It was in the process of changing, so I enjoyed my school, I enjoyed my training, and it stood me in good stead.
Nice. So let's move kind of away from your childhood now and towards your working life, your working career. What was your first job?
Well, first job was, as I say, was as an article clerk, training to be a chartered accountant, and I moved on from there through various manufacturing companies. I've always preferred to be in a manufacturing environment rather than a services environment. And in fact, towards the end of my career, I got in one situation where technology overtook the company I was working for, and they couldn't compete, and I was actually made redundant. And when you're in your mid-50s and you're made redundant, it doesn't matter what qualifications and experience you've got. Employers aren't generally very interested. But local authorities are much better at that. They will take on older people. And I finished up working for Bath and North East Somerset, because I worked in Wiltshire, just nearby, lived in Wiltshire, and but I couldn't bear the thought of working for local authority accounting, because that's so boring, because all you're doing is trying to save money, because that's all they can do, is to be careful how they spend their money. But what I managed to get was a job working for the pension fund, and I worked for it's administered by the local authority, but I worked for Avon. I was actually the accountant for Avon Pension Fund. So of course, with a pension fund, you've got £2 billion of other people's money that you're looking after. You're investing, and of course, if you invest, you don't invest nationally, you invest globally. So you're dealing in all over the world, and you're dealing in multi-currencies: Japanese yen, American dollars, New Zealand dollars, South African rand, whatever. And when I first joined, before the euro came in, so it was French francs, Belgian francs, Italian lira, it's German marks, and so on. It was good. What a lot of people don't realise as well, of course, if you trade in foreign shares, generally speaking, you've got to pay in their currency. So not only are you sort of risking that, but you're risking the currency fluctuations as well. And a lot of people don't realise that money is just a commodity. You can buy and sell money, and it's quite interesting. You want to buy some Japanese shares. but you need the yen to do it, so you can buy the yen in advance to know, then you know what exchange rate you're buying them at. It can be quite interesting. Also, an interesting byproduct that I had, because of the role I was in, when the national government gives out their grants to local authorities, they pay out a big lump at a time. They pay up front. The local authorities are going to spend that throughout the year. And for a large part of the year, they've got money which has got to last, so you have to do something with it. And very often you can place that on the London money markets. And that was one of the things I had to do on their behalf. And it's very nice when the banks cash up at the end of the day. They might have a little bit of a shortfall, they want the next 10 million here or 10 million there. And it's a lovely feeling, which I've done in the past, lending £10 million to Barclays Bank. Might only be overnight, but it's a nice feeling.
Throughout your life, there must have been a lot of lessons that you learned. What would you say has been the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your life?
The biggest lesson is to take your opportunities when they come. Grab them. Work hard at them. Don't be afraid to open your mouth and say so. Be polite, but be assertive. Put your case. And very often, you can get what you want if you work hard.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear. If you could go back to any age or any year in your life, what would it be? And very briefly, why is that?
Well, I suppose it might be nice to go back to when I was first married, because it was a lovely life. Children growing up is a lovely experience. We had 2 lovely children who have now grown up to be particularly lovely adults, and we're very proud of them. We've also got a grandson of whom we're very proud. And yes, I think family life's important. My parents always were very close to their siblings, and that's what I've grown up with, and I feel the same. My family is important to me, and I just no, I don't have too many regrets. I've enjoyed my life. I'm quite happy.
That's really
I look back.
That's really great to hear. Again, big question, but if you had to choose one day to consider it the best day of your life, what would you say that day is?
Well, as I said, family is important to me. Our first child, our daughter, when she was born in hospital, and in those days they still had a very strict regime where fathers weren't allowed to be present. And in fact, when I visited my wife when she'd first had Helen wasn't there. Helen was away in another room. So I never saw my daughter until Brenda was discharged after 10 days. And that disappointed me, that I'd never actually held her in my arms as a newborn infant. So when our son was born, he was born at home. And I was present for the birth. And I think that was a wonderful experience. I often tell the story how I wear a wedding ring, and a wedding ring's round. Brenda, when baby was being born, she was squeezing my hand so hard that it finished up shaped like an oval. I had to go to a jeweller and have it made round again. It hurt. It was a lovely experience though. I'm so glad I was there.
Let's move to the present day. So you're here at Gabriel Court. Obviously we've heard Brenda in the previous episode talk about how you ended up here. So I think the answer will be very similar, but if we briefly go over it, how long have you been living here? 10 years?
10 years, yeah.
And what made you move to this development?
Yes, it's because of where it is and where it's positioned, and we particularly wanted to be on the ground floor because when we actually told our children that we were going to move back to the southeast, their first comment was, "Oh, you'll miss your garden." Well, yes, we would. We did. But we knew that if we could get a ground floor apartment, we could take over the little bits of ground adjacent to our, because we're around that side and the front, round up there.
Yeah.
And McCarthy and Stone were keen to encourage us to do that, in the knowledge that when it got to be too much, we could just pass it back. As I said, I had an allotment as well as a big garden, because we had front garden, 2 side gardens and a back garden. It was a big area. And it was getting to the point where it was becoming hard work. I enjoyed it, but I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this for much longer. So it was right to move down. We were ready. We planned, though, and this is what people don't do enough. They don't plan.
Yeah.
You've got to have an aspiration, work towards it, and that's what I think we've done, and that's what I think I'm proud of in our life, that we have set our targets and we've achieved our dreams.
That's really nice to hear. Again, we heard Brenda in the last episode answering these same questions, your wife. So obviously these are going to be very similar. But how do you find this type of community living?
Oh, it's good. Yes, I echo what Brenda said. We mix well. When we were first moving in, like everywhere else, there's a few little snagging problems, and I tended to be the one that spoke the most, and because I'm not afraid to speak my mind. And so before you know where you are, let's have a little association, residence group, and you'll be chairman, David, won't you? Because you. So I finished up doing that. But no, we do get called upon even now. Sure, we lead. We have little visits out. Sometimes a group of us will go out and have a group lunch. It becomes more and more difficult as the people here get older and are less mobile, less of a drive now. Quite a few have had to give up. Invariably, you give up driving because eyesight is the biggest problem. I'm still lucky I can drive. But no, it's great. We have a very good group of neighbours, and we get on well.
And finally, very quickly, would you recommend this type of community living?
Absolutely.
That's really
absolutely.
nice.
But if you do come, get involved.
Get involved with like social activities.
Get involved with it, yes.
That's really nice. One final question that I ask everyone, and I'll ask you, what one piece of advice would you give to the younger generations listening?
Think what you want, plan ahead, work for it, and get yourself the best education you can.
And just like that, another week done. Make sure you join me next week with my guest Margaret. She'll be here sharing her stories through the decades. And of course, don't forget to share the podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music or YouTube, and turn on notifications to never miss an episode. Apart from that, I'll see you this time next week with Margaret.